He dreamed of her death. The next morning, she disappeared. Mark Davis never believed in prophetic dreams until the night he saw Lisa in one. The vision came with startling clarity. She stood in a rain-soaked field, her clothes clinging to her body, lips moving in an endless whisper of a single word, "Run." Then something emerged from the darkness and took her. The dream jolted him awake at 3:17 a.m. His t-shirt was damp with sweat, and the bedroom felt uncomfortably cold despite the mild September weather. Mark reached for his phone with trembling hands and dialed Lisa's number. The call went straight to voicemail. He tried again. And again. "Hey, it's Lisa. Leave a message." Her cheerful voice recording only intensified his unease. Lisa always answered his calls, even in the middle of the night. They'd been dating for 2 years, and she knew he wouldn't disturb her sleep unless it was important. Mark got dressed and drove to her apartment across town. The streets were empty, creating an eerie stillness that made every traffic light feel like an eternity. When he arrived, her car wasn't in its usual spot. The security guard at the front desk hadn't seen her either. "Ms. Wheeler usually comes home around 10, the guard said, checking his logbook. "She didn't sign in last night." "That's impossible. She never stays out without telling me." The guard shrugged. "Maybe she's at a friend's place." Mark called everyone they knew. Nobody had seen Lisa since she left work the previous evening. Her colleague Sarah was the last person to see her, around 9 p.m. at the office. She was finishing up some reports, Sarah said, her voice groggy with sleep. Said she'd email them to the client first thing in the morning. The email never arrived. By noon, Mark was sitting in the police station, trying to explain his concern to Detective Karen Martinez. She was in her 50s, with sharp eyes that seemed to catch every detail of his nervous movements. "Mr. Davis, adults have the right to go wherever they want," Martinez said, tapping her pen against a notepad. "We can't file a missing person report until 48 hours have passed." "You don't understand," Mark insisted. "I had this dream." The detective's expression hardened. "A dream? I know how it sounds, but something's wrong. I can feel it. Lisa wouldn't just disappear. She's organized, responsible. She has a major presentation on Monday. She wouldn't risk her job by vanishing without notice." Martinez studied him for a long moment. "Any recent arguments? Problems in the relationship?" "No, everything was perfect. We were planning a trip to Maine next month." "Drug use? Depression? Financial troubles?" "None of that." "Look, can you at least check her apartment?" The detective sighed. "We'll send someone to do a welfare check. That's all I can do for now." Mark left the station feeling helpless. He drove back to Lisa's apartment building, where the property manager finally agreed to let him in after he showed photos of them together on his phone. The apartment was exactly as Lisa had left it. Her laptop sat closed on the kitchen counter. A half-empty coffee mug stood beside it, with a faint lipstick mark on the rim. Everything looked normal, except for one detail that made Mark's blood run cold. There was a strange symbol drawn on her bathroom mirror, visible only when the steam from his anxious breathing fogged up the glass. It was a complex geometric pattern, reminiscent of ancient runes or mathematical equations. Something about its sharp angles and intricate curves triggered a memory. He had seen this symbol before, in his dream, etched into the wet soil of that rain-soaked field. Mark photographed the symbol with his phone and began searching online. Hours passed as he dove deeper into obscure websites and forums. His research led him to Dr. Eleanor Chen, a local professor specializing in ancient symbolism and cognitive archaeology. "This is fascinating," Dr. Chen said when they met in her cluttered university office. Degrees and artifacts covered the walls, and books were stacked everywhere like miniature towers. The pattern shares elements with protection symbols found in various cultures, but its composition is unique. Where did you see this? Mark hesitated before telling her the truth. To his surprise, she didn't dismiss his dream. The connection between dreams and reality has been studied across civilizations, she said, pulling out a heavy book. Some ancient cultures believed certain symbols could bridge the gap between different states of consciousness. But be careful, those who studied these phenomena often reported strange experiences. Distortions in time, memory gaps, unexplained. Her phone rang, interrupting her. The caller ID showed an unfamiliar number. "Excuse me," she said, answering. Her expression changed as she listened. "Yes, this is Dr. Chen." "No, I haven't seen her." "When?" "I see." "Yes, I'll let you know if." "Yes, officer." She hung up and looked at Mark with concern. "That was about my research assistant, Jenny. She didn't show up for work today. The police are asking questions." "When was the last time you saw her?" "Yesterday evening. She was helping me catalog some artifacts related to dream symbolism." Mark felt a chill run down his spine. "Did she handle anything with this symbol?" "No, but..." Dr. Chen's voice trailed off as she walked to a filing cabinet. She pulled out a folder and spread several photographs across her desk. They showed various artifacts with similar geometric patterns. She was particularly interested in this one. The photograph showed a small bronze disc, its surface covered in concentric circles and angular symbols. In the center was a pattern almost identical to the one from Lisa's mirror. "Where's the actual disc?" Mark asked. "That's the strange part. It disappeared from our secure storage last week. Jenny was helping me track it down." Mark's phone buzzed, a text from Detective Martinez, "Come to the station. New information about Lisa." At the police station, Martinez looked more troubled than before. "We found Lisa's car," she said, spreading photographs across her desk. It was abandoned in the parking lot of Willow Creek Park, about 30 miles outside the city. The images showed Lisa's blue Honda Civic, perfectly parked in an empty lot surrounded by dense woods. There were no signs of struggle, no broken windows or scratches. Just an empty car with a single item on the passenger seat, a small bronze disc. "It matches the description of the artifact stolen from the university," Mark said, his voice shaking. "Did you find any fingerprints?" Martinez shook her head. "The car was wiped clean. Too clean. But here's something interesting, the dashboard clock was stuck at 3:17. The same time Mark had woken from his dream." "There's more," Martinez continued, pulling out another photo. "We found this carved into a tree near the car. It was the symbol from the mirror." "I'm listening now," Martinez said, leaning forward. "Tell me everything about this symbol and the dream." As Mark explained, the detective's skepticism gave way to focused attention. She pulled up other case files on her computer. 3 similar disappearances in the past month, she said. All within a 50-mile radius. All involving people who worked with or studied ancient artifacts. And in each case, someone reported having dreams about the missing person the night they vanished. Why hasn't this been in the news? Because it sounds crazy. Dreams, mysterious symbols, missing artifacts, it reads like a horror story, not a police investigation. But now we have physical evidence linking the cases. Mark's phone buzzed again. A text from an unknown number, "The field exists. Follow the disc." Attached was a photo of a rain-soaked field at night, identical to the one from his dream. Martinez traced the number, but it led nowhere. The photo's metadata had been stripped clean. However, their IT department managed to identify a cell tower that had transmitted the message, located near an abandoned farm 30 miles north of Willow Creek Park. "I'm going there," Mark said. "Not alone," Martinez replied, checking her service weapon. This just became an official investigation. They drove separately, following GPS coordinates from the cell tower data. The sun was setting when they turned onto a dirt road that cut through overgrown fields. The air felt heavy with moisture, though it hadn't rained in days. Mark's car radio started picking up strange interference, fragments of voices and music that shouldn't have been broadcasting in such a remote area. Among the static, he caught what sounded like Lisa's voice, "Time isn't, be careful, the symbol connects." Martinez's police cruiser suddenly stopped ahead. She got out, waving for Mark to do the same. "Look at this," she said, pointing her flashlight at the ground. A series of fresh tire tracks led into a field, stopping abruptly as if the vehicle had vanished mid-drive. Beside the tracks was a familiar pattern pressed into the mud, the symbol, larger than any they'd seen before, spanning at least 20 feet in diameter. "Those tracks," Martinez said, examining them closely. "They match Lisa's car. But we have her car in the park lot." "How?" She was interrupted by a sound that made them both freeze, a phone ringing in the darkness, playing Lisa's distinctive ringtone. It was coming from an old farmhouse barely visible in the distance, its windows dark except for one on the upper floor that seemed to flicker with an unnatural blue light. "Call for backup," Mark said. Martinez was already reaching for her radio, but only static came through. She tried her cell phone, no signal. "Something's interfering with the frequencies. We should wait." But Mark was already moving toward the house, drawn by the ringtone that had now changed to Lisa's voice. "Mark? I can see you." "Davis, stop!" Martinez commanded, hurrying after him. "This is exactly how people die in." She cut herself off, realizing this wasn't the time for dark humor. The farmhouse loomed before them, its weathered boards creaking in the evening breeze. The porch steps groaned under their weight. Martinez drew her weapon, taking point as they approached the front door. It swung open at her touch. Their flashlight beams revealed an interior that defied logic. The floor was covered in a thin layer of water, perfectly still, reflecting their lights like a mirror. The symbol from Lisa's mirror was everywhere, carved into the walls, drawn in what looked like ash on the ceiling, formed by the arrangement of scattered furniture. "Police? Anyone here?" Martinez's voice echoed strangely, as if the room were much larger than it appeared from outside. They found stairs leading up, each step marked with glowing blue symbols that faded as soon as they passed. The second floor was a maze of corridors that seemed to spiral in impossible ways. Mark's sense of direction became distorted. He could have sworn they'd turned right 4 times in a row, yet somehow hadn't come back to their starting point. "Look," Martinez whispered, pointing to a door at the end of the hall. Blue light pulsed around its frame in sync with a low humming sound. Lisa's phone lay on the floor before it, screen cracked but still displaying Mark's missed calls from that morning. Martinez picked up the phone with a gloved hand. "The timestamp on these notifications. Mark, they're from tomorrow." Before he could process this, the humming intensified. The door began to open on its own, revealing a room that couldn't possibly exist within the farmhouse's dimensions. It was vast, circular, its walls covered in constantly shifting symbols. In the center stood what looked like Lisa's car, the same one they'd found in the park, but this version was pristine, water streaming off its surface as if it had just emerged from a deep pool. Dr. Chen's research assistant, Jenny, stood beside the car, her expression blank as she traced symbols in the air with her fingers. They hung there, glowing, before dissolving into mist. Other figures moved in the shadows behind her, more missing people, all engaged in the same trance-like activity. And there was Lisa, standing at what appeared to be the room's focal point. Her clothes were soaked, just as in Mark's dream, but her eyes reflected the same blue light that filled the room. "You shouldn't have come," she said, but her voice seemed to come from everywhere at once. "The pattern isn't complete yet. The transition is unstable." "Lisa, what's happening? What is this place?" "Time isn't linear here," she replied, her movements jerky and unnatural. The symbol is a key, the disc is a door, and we are becoming the lock. They showed us how to break through, but we need more observers to stabilize the connection. They? Who are they? Martinez demanded, her gun trained on the shifting shadows. The ones who dream on the other side, Jenny answered, her voice overlapping with Lisa's. They've been reaching out through our dreams for centuries, teaching us the patterns. We're so close now. So close to understanding. The room began to pulse, its walls rippling like disturbed water. The symbols grew brighter, more intense, their geometric patterns seeming to reach out into three-dimensional space. Mark noticed that every person in the room was wearing the same vacant expression, their movements synchronized as they continued their strange ritual. Martinez holstered her weapon. It seemed pointless here, where reality itself appeared to be breaking down. She pulled out the bronze disc they'd found in Lisa's car. Is this what you're looking for? The collective attention of everyone in the room shifted to the disc. The air grew thick with anticipation. The final key, Lisa whispered, her voice now sounding more like herself. Mark, you brought it to us. You completed the circle without even knowing. What circle? Lisa, this isn't you. Whatever's happening, we can figure it out together. But I understand now, she said, taking a step toward him. The dreams weren't warnings, they were invitations. Every person here saw the truth in their sleep before they found their way to this place. Even you, Mark. You saw me in that field because part of you already knew. Part of you belongs here too. The symbols on the walls began to align, forming larger and more complex patterns. The humming grew louder, and Mark felt a strange sensation, as if gravity itself was becoming uncertain. Water from the floor began to defy physics, running up the walls and across the ceiling in impossible patterns. Detective, Jenny called out, her eyes fixed on the disc. You feel it too, don't you? The dreams you've been having since you took this case. The symbols in your notebook that you don't remember drawing. Martinez's hand trembled slightly. How did you? Show her, Lisa commanded. Martinez reluctantly pulled out her notebook. On the last page, drawn in what looked like an endless spiral, was the same symbol they'd been following, rendered with perfect precision despite the detective's insistence that she had no memory of drawing it. It's already in your mind, Lisa continued. All of you who've seen the symbol, it's changing you, preparing you. The more you try to solve the mystery, the deeper you become part of it. A low rumble shook the building. The car in the center of the room began to fade in and out of existence, like a glitch in reality. Through its increasingly transparent form, Mark could see what looked like another room, mirror inverted, where dark figures moved with deliberate purpose. The gateway is destabilizing, Jenny announced. We need the disc now. Lisa held out her hand to Mark. You have a choice. You can leave, try to forget what you've seen, go back to a world that will never make sense again. Or you can stay, learn the truth about what exists in the spaces between dreams and reality. By becoming like you? Mark asked, gesturing to her empty eyes and mechanical movements. By becoming more than we are, she corrected. The symbols aren't just patterns, Mark. They're a language older than time, a code that rewrites the rules of existence. Every person here has learned to read it, to speak it, to become it. Martinez stepped forward, her training warring with the pull of whatever force had drawn them all here. Davis, we need to leave. Now. Whatever this is, it's bigger than a missing persons case. But Mark couldn't move. In Lisa's outstretched hand, he saw a familiar glint, the engagement ring he'd been planning to give her next month, the one that was supposed to be hidden in his desk drawer at home. How did you? Time works differently here, she explained. Past, present, future, they're all just patterns waiting to be rearranged. I've seen every possible version of us, Mark. In some, you leave this room and spend the rest of your life trying to forget. In others, you stay, and we learn to reshape reality together. The symbols on the walls began to pulse more rapidly. The dark figures in the mirrored room grew clearer, their forms suggesting something not quite human. The air crackled with energy, and Mark felt his thoughts beginning to fragment, as if his mind was being pulled in multiple directions at once. Martinez grabbed his arm. "Whatever you're thinking, whatever you're feeling, it's not real. They're manipulating us, using our memories, our desires." "No," Lisa interrupted, her voice carrying an authority that seemed to ripple through the air. "We're showing you what's always been real, what humans have forgotten how to see. The symbols were left for us to find, scattered through history, waiting in our dreams. They're not just a key to another world, they're a key to understanding what this world really is." The detective's grip on Mark's arm tightened. "Davis, listen to me. I've seen cases like this before, not the supernatural part, but the pattern. People disappear, leaving behind symbols and cryptic messages. Their loved ones follow, trying to understand. Nobody ever comes back. Don't let yourself become another statistic in a cold case file." But Mark was watching Lisa, not her empty eyes or unnatural movements, but her hand holding the ring. It was trembling slightly, a very human gesture that seemed to break through her otherworldly demeanor. For a moment, he saw a flash of the real Lisa, scared but determined, trying to communicate something beyond words. The rumbling intensified. Cracks appeared in the air itself, showing glimpses of other places, other times. Through one, Mark saw himself and Lisa in what looked like Dr. Chen's office, but the books were different, the artifacts arranged in impossible ways. Through another, he saw the farmhouse as it might have been a century ago, where different people drew the same symbols on different walls. "Time is running out," Jenny announced. "The gateway won't hold much longer without the disc." Martinez suddenly stumbled, dropping her notebook. As it fell, pages fanned out revealing dozens of sheets covered in the symbol, each drawing more complex than the last. She stared at them in horror, finally remembering the dreams that had led her to this case, the truth she'd been subconsciously avoiding. "Choose now," Lisa said to both of them. "Stay and understand, or leave and forget." Mark looked at the ring, then at Lisa's eyes, searching for any sign of the woman he loved. Behind her, the dark figures drew closer to the thinning barrier between worlds. The symbols on the walls had begun to move on their own, rearranging themselves into patterns that hurt to look at, suggesting geometries that shouldn't exist. In that moment, Mark understood that there was no going back, not really. Even if he left, the symbols were already part of him, dancing behind his eyes, whispering their secrets in his dreams. The mystery wouldn't end at the farmhouse door. It would follow him, puzzle him, call to him until he finally returned to this room, to this choice. He reached for Lisa's hand. Martinez's voice caught in her throat. "Davis, don't." But Mark had already made his decision. As his fingers brushed against the ring, the symbols flared blindingly bright. The last thing he saw was Lisa's smile, not empty now, but full of recognition and something else, something that might have been either triumph or regret. The farmhouse still stands, its windows dark except for occasional flickers of blue light. Sometimes, people driving past report seeing impossible reflections, or hearing fragments of phone conversations that haven't happened yet. The symbol appears in unexpected places, in frost patterns on windows, in coffee stains on newspapers, in the dreams of those who get too curious about the disappearances. And in a small evidence locker at the police station, Detective Martinez's notebook sits unopened, its pages filled with endlessly repeating patterns that wait to be discovered by the next investigator who dreams of finding the truth.